There are more of the questionnaires to take notes in the back, and we're making some more of those. If anybody doesn't have one, you can pick it up on the way back, or we can get somebody to bring it to you. Raise your hand if you don't have other papers. If you don't have one of the questionnaire papers, raise your hand and we'll pass them out. I'm Mary Ann Johnson. I'm the co-chair of the Healthcare Committee with Elvira Seghetti, and I thought this might be a good topic just to go over to let y'all know what happens behind the scenes if you go to the hospital. And when anybody goes to the hospital, especially if it's an emergency admission, it's very stressful on the family and on the patient, and it's very anxiety provoking. So you're in a new place, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and your mind goes everywhere, but probably where it should be as to how you're going to be when you get out. So there is a whole team here that works on getting you back home. Their goal is to get you back home. Their goal is to make sure that they have you in the right place if you need to rehab or if you need health care. They have occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy if you need that. Sometimes it is a bumpy road, but you need to know that from the minute you get into the hospital, there is somebody knowing when they think you might be discharged, what your needs may be, and we have a lot of people here today from administration. So I will briefly tell you who is here. Jeff unfortunately could not make it, but we have Tamika Ross, who's the Director of Nursing. We have Brittany, who we will call the bed manager. She knows where all the beds are, what's available and what's not. We have the social worker from healthcare, Christina. We have Kathy, who is a social worker on the independent side. And now I've forgotten the last part. It's Brittany, right? Emily.
From assisted living.
And she's assisted living. A little bit about me. A lot of you know who I am. I have been admitted to a hospital as an emergency. I've been in healthcare myself. I've had family members in healthcare. I have had patients that I've admitted to the hospital by trade. I am a family practitioner. I have patients that I followed for months and sometimes years when they were in healthcare. So I've kind of have seen healthcare. I've seen hospital admissions and admissions to nursing homes and the care of the elderly from various aspects. So one of the first things that is probably most important, if you're having elective surgery, you know what day you're going, and it's easy to let somebody know that in 1 week I'm going in to have a knee replacement and this is what I'm going to need. So a lot of this is more pertinent toward someone that goes into the hospital as an emergency. And Tamika's going to go over this. One of the primary things that Cedarfield needs to know is they need to know where you are. So I'm going to let Tamika come up and talk about this and how to notify Cedarfield so that we can get everything going in place.
Woo, Tamika!
Oh, yeah. She's putting me on the spot. Is it this mic here?
Push the button.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, I'm glad that you all showed up here today. It's a big crowd. Kathy's put me on the spot because this is really her job. But so we do have a process that we take care of. I'm going to get Kathy to come up here with me because she is the IL social workers, which is Kathy and Lynette. They're the two that you would notify if you're going to have an elective procedure. And I will let her tell us what that process looks like from her standpoint.
Hey everyone, good to see you. If I'm too loud, just go like that. Being from New York, I usually don't need a mic, but maybe this time I do. So I think it's so important when we were talking with Dr. Johnson really quickly. It's one thing to have planned surgery, that's difficult enough, but when you've now fallen, you can't get up, you know, EMS is being called, you have enough anxiety of where am I going to land, who do I need to contact? So simply that's what this meeting is all about, to give you all the opportunity and to reassure all of you that there actually is a team that is aware basically the minute that a pull cord is pulled, a pendant is pushed, or even a lot of times a neighbor will just call and say, so-and-so just fell. The first thing that happens basically, of course, first and foremost, is 911 is contacted. Through walkie-talkies, we notify the gatehouse, so the gatehouse knows not only to let the emergency vehicles in, but also where to escort them. So we're not wasting time like, oh, she's on C wing, we're over at A wing. So those are, you know, time is of the essence, especially when there's an emergency and we really don't know, you know, what we're dealing with. The vial of life is an integral part of what they say the evening supervisor or the clinic nurse will hand to EMS. Please make sure your daughter or son's got a new cell phone number. Make sure that everything in your vial of life in your refrigerator is up to date, because that is given to the EMS personnel, and that is, we also of course have a copy in the clinic, but that is whoever your emergency contact is on that is usually who is called. Now say if it's after hours, oh, come on now.
So we're tag teaming this a little bit. I want to talk about what happens after hours, because the supervisor, I work closely with the supervisors that cover independent living for emergencies. So basically, if you pull your pendant and the supervisor has responded to that, and they think that you need to go out to the emergency room for care, we have a clipboard there. So just like Kathy said, we get the vial of life out of the refrigerator so that if it's something that we have to send you out to the hospital for, we notify the emergency person that's listed on the vial of life. We also will notify your provider. And once you go to the hospital, we usually, the supervisor will call. So if you go around 8 p.m., the supervisor will call before that shift ends for them at 11 to see what the update is. So we're getting updates from the hospital. And so the next supervisor that comes in at 11 p.m., that person will also call to get updates. So the clinic has a clipboard, and that's a communication tool that we use. So when the supervisor responds to an emergency, they're able to document that. So in the morning when the clinic personnel comes in, they are able to see that Mr. Jones went out to the hospital. And so that's how we communicate between the supervisor after hours and the clinic. So the next day when Kathy and the team comes in, they're able to see, okay, Mr. Jones is in the hospital, and then Kathy picks that up.
And perfect, so that was the next step, which is, as an independent living resident, because there might be people from assisted living here as well, as an independent living resident, if you go out, so say someone goes out, Mr. Jones, and myself and Lynette are looking at the 24-hour clipboard, and it says, Mr. Jones fell, went out 911, Henrico Doctors Forest. It's at that time that I'm actually the person assigned right now, would contact the nurses station at Henrico Doctors Forest and say, I'm calling from Cedarfield. One of our residents is there. We're just checking up and following up. Sometimes they'll say, oh, we already sent them home. You know, this was all transpired. They had some tests at 2 in the morning. They were sent home. Sometimes they'll say they've got a fractured hip. They're scheduled for surgery. We don't have a discharge date yet. The hospitals are so busy. Two things I want to say first and foremost. When Ann or Lynette or I go to an emergency visit in an apartment or a cottage, It's unbelievable, but a lot of times, unless you're profusely bleeding, 911 will say, well, do you want to go? And we're like, oh my gosh, take these people to get some medical attention. But we've seen it, and I hate to say it, but they'll be like, if you say no, you know what, I'm okay, I don't really need to go. Let me wait a couple of days, see how I'm feeling, and then they will leave you. So just be mindful when they ask you, if Anne is making the assessment to call 911, if you can defer to her medical expertise basically and just it's better to be checked out, make sure everything's okay, than to wait to say 2 days and then have an even more emergency. That was something 10 years ago I wasn't finding that they were doing. If you call 911, you were sent to the hospital. Now they will actually ask you, do you want to go? And if we cannot make you go, if you say, if Cedarfield thinks you should go, but you're like, no, I'm not going, then you're not going. So I think that's something that not everyone's aware of. We cannot make you go. You have the right to refuse EMS, but more than not, we have found out if we're making that recommendation, it's usually best to adhere to that. So, anything else you want to?
So talk about how how that process is, how you update it from the hospital.
Okay, so say we got Mr. Jones, he's got a broken hip, which is horrible. As you all know, hospitals are all about discharging. They want to discharge you out. So I have to ask, anyone want to admit, I was born in '64, how long did a woman stay in the hospital after having a baby? Right? Can we talk? 5 days. Now, you know, pacemaker for a 97-year-old, oh, he's fine. Let's send him back home. You know, it's like, oh my gosh. So the goal is discharge, discharge, discharge. So as receiving you as a resident, we want to make sure it's a safe discharge. So because their goal is get them out, get them out, get them fixed and get them out. So we want to make sure that it's a safe discharge. So either myself or Lynette will contact the nurse to find out what exactly happened to Mr. Jones. If it is, say, like a hip where you need surgery, then what'll happen is when you're ready to be discharged back to Cedarfield, you will be assigned a case manager from the hospital. Until you're assigned a case manager, there's no discharge orders. And a lot of times the doctors will visit in the morning and say, he or she is good to go. And that's when the case manager will usually call Lynette or I the day before you're scheduled to come back to Cedarfield. When you come back to Cedarfield, it is the hospital's case manager who is responsible for providing transportation back here. If you have been admitted to the hospital, you never have to worry about how am I getting home. It is the case manager's responsibility, and they will coordinate it with the services that they have at the hospital. So a lot of times Lynette and I are actually talking to the nurses ahead of time. If someone's in ICU or CICU, we're talking to the nurses to find out how you're doing, but we already know based on, so they'll send lab reports, they'll send post-op surgery notes, they'll send all these things, and we go ahead and fax them to this wonderful team in healthcare. So they know, not only did they have hip surgery, it was a partial hip. So, you know, right away we know what all these different medicals mean, so we know how to prepare to receive you. Once you're discharged, like I said, they have to provide the transportation, and we're already talking, like we know in advance, so-and-so's gonna need a bed in healthcare. So-and-so's, you know, broken a hip, so-and-so's, so again, just the reassurance that if something happens to you, there's a whole team of people who are aware.
So once Kathy and Lynette they give us the medical documents and information, usually I review it and the clinical leader of whichever household you'll be going to review it. So we review it just to see what your needs look like they would be. And we normally give the providers a heads up too that Mr. Jones plans to return on Thursday with a right hip fracture so that everybody's on the same page. And I'm going to call Brittany up because once we know that we have a resident that will be coming over to healthcare, Brittany, she's the one that does the bed management. So she tells Kathy, okay, I have 4801, and that's where Mr. Jones is going to go. So I'll let her explain that process.
Wow. Hi guys, it's a lot of you up here. Before I became the bed manager, I am the household leader of Magnolia Meadow, which is one of the healthcare households here at Cedarfield. So once either Kathleen or Lynette or Ann have determined that one of our residents needs healthcare, they will call me and let me know, hey, this person, needs our assistance in healthcare. So like Tamika said, I will look at where everybody is and see the residents that are currently in healthcare and see who is coming up on the end of their therapy stay, who's just gotten here, where is going to be the best fit for any resident that's leaving the hospital. So I am in charge of all of the beds, as Kathy and Tamika said, to make sure that we always have a place for if something goes bump in the night, or if something is wrong and it is an emergent basis, so that we have room for all of our residents.
What if you don't have a bed?
So all of our residents, put me on the spot right off the bat. It is, you're absolutely right. Repeat the question. I thought you said it was a big question, I'm sorry. Her question was, what if there is not any beds available in healthcare? So all of you guys have, or should have access to your Medicare benefits. So if the hospital stay that you are admitted to the hospital for is eligible for use of your Medicare benefits, you can go to any skilled facility. That's not just Cedarfield. So once we become skilled and Medicare certified, then you can of course use your benefits here. But otherwise you can go to any other skilled facility to be able to use your benefits. If you choose not to do that and want to come to Cedarfield, then we will, if there is not a bed available, then we will do everything in our power to make sure that you're taken care of in the level of care where you are. So if you're in independent living and you go to an elective surgery, or if you go to the hospital and it's emergent and you do need care, then we'll make sure that we provide that for you.
The other thing I would like to mention is sometimes it doesn't happen often, but if we know that Mr. Jones needs a bed on Thursday, we'll start looking at who's at the end of their therapy and who could possibly be discharged to go home with home health. And we have to look at the safety of that, but we do try to look at all of our options that we have to make sure if that you have a bed at Cedarfield if need be. So just a little bit about availability. She has that great job of making sure you have a bed. So if you don't have a bed, it's Brittany's fault. I'm just kidding. It is a big job and it's something that we take seriously. We do meet every Wednesday at 11 a.m. to talk about bed management and where residents are at the end, at the beginning, and how much longer we have. So that's something that we don't take lightly, and we want to make sure that you have a bed here. But I will tell you, the way that it works is we'll have 5 beds, right, for like 2 weeks, and then we go to 0. And that's just Murphy's Law, I guess. But we do work very hard to try to make sure that happens. It's just, we really can't control when someone gets sick and need emergency care, but it just seems to happen all at once for the most part. But
Are there any questions?
I'll get this question first and I'll get you next.
Are there any skilled facilities nearby, and will they release you to Cedarfield if you all get a bed quickly enough?
Absolutely. So her question was, is there any skilled facilities nearby, and will they release the resident from that skilled facility to Cedarfield once a bed is available? Yes. Brittany, actually, if we have Our Lady of Hope that's nearby, a few others. Beth Shalom and Lakewood. So we have a few that are nearby, and we've had someone in another skilled facility, but Brittany also keeps up with that person. So if you happen to land at a skilled facility, we're still contacting them just like we would contact the hospital to see where you are with your therapy services. And if a bed opens up here, yes, you're able to transfer back to Cedarfield.
My question goes back to being admitted to the hospital. What if you go to the emergency room, not in the hospital, but like the emergency room that's out on, that St. Mary's has out on Broad Street, and you're in that emergency room, and you get sent to the hospital. Then how does Cedarfield get notified?
So you're speaking of if you go to Short Pump, the standalone. If you go to Short Pump and then they say, well, we think you need some more workup, we're gonna send you over to St. Mary's Hospital. It's the same process. I do want to mention, because that's kind of leading into what happens if you have an emergency and you're not at Cedarfield. So it's no way for us to know. So you're out in the community with your family, you've been with them for the weekend, and if you've had an emergency and you've landed in the hospital. So we wouldn't know because it didn't happen here, right? So that's Dr. Johnson. She has created these cards for you. The concierge number, 474-8800, will ask in that you all or your family just contact the concierge, and we will get you to the right person. And depending on who it is, it could be Brittany, it could be Kathy, it could be Lynette, and we will track you down the same way once we know that you're there. But we're getting concierge to push those calls up because we don't want you to be burdened with having to know several different phone numbers. Because depending on what time of day, you have to have a different number, and we don't want to put you in that place to have to know different phone numbers. So, yes, ma'am.
And I asked specifically because it happened to me, and then you end up in the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning, and there is no one at the concierge desk at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
So if you have that little card with the number, fortunately somebody will call that number and it will be transferred to?
It will be transferred to the nursing supervisor, and that's how we know. So that nursing supervisor will get that information to the appropriate person. So after hours, the phone for concierge is pushed up to one of the households that goes to the nursing supervisor. So you don't have to worry about that. I verified that with Florence yesterday, by the way, just to make sure. She's gonna bring the mic over to you. Thank you for doing that. We put her to work.
Okay, I'm out in the local community and I'm in an accident. I have no local family. I'm put into ICU, so obviously I cannot call. So again, what do we do?
So the bright idea was to attach the card with the number to your Medicare card, because most times they're going to go through your information so that they can know who you are to identify you. Once they see that, that hospital will call Cedarfield. And once they contact us, we'll pick that up and do whatever we need to do for you and start that communication. So that case manager that Kathy was speaking of, when patients are admitted to the hospital, they are always assigned a case manager, and that case manager pretty much follows them through until they're discharged. They're responsible for coming up with that discharge plan, so they have to call us because they wouldn't know what to do if they didn't call. Any other questions? We have one over here. What two?
How is it determined which hospital I go to?
Oh, that's a great question. Most times, I know on the health services side, if we have to send a resident out to the hospital, of course you have, most people have the preferred hospital written on their vow of life. And I will say, are you taking them, they prefer to go to St. Mary's, and sometimes they will say, well, St. Mary's can't take any more admissions, so we're gonna probably have to send them to Henrico doctors, but we'll call you. So if you're picked up here from an emergency, normally the EMS will call us back and say, Mr. Jones went to St. Mary's, because they will try to take you to your preferred hospital, but most times it depends on the capacity. Sometimes they're diverted.
What if you go to the emergency room and you're not admitted? How do you get home?
Oh, you're asking all the great questions. So we have the supervisor after hours. They've been educated and notified that we have 2 companies, and I did not look. I know James Limousine is one, and we have a taxi. I think it's Henrico Taxi and James Limousine that we use, and the supervisor will call them to set transportation up for you. You're not expected to call them, we will call for you. And we will call you back. I remember this actually happened one night. We will call you back and say, Mr. Jones, James Limousine will be there to pick you up in 30 minutes.
And that number is also, it's concierge.
So concierge, so call concierge, and it's gonna be pushed up to the supervisor.
Who pays for it?
Ooh. The question is, who pays for it? So they bill Cedarfield, and then once it gets into billing, it will be billed back to you.
I have a question regarding EMTs coming to your house. I've had to call 911 several times for my husband, and I wanted him to take him to VCU, and the EMTs said they will not take him there, but now that is his preferred doctors. How do I get him there?
That's a hard one, because when the EMTs come to pick you up, and it's an emergency, they look at it from a perspective as I'm getting you to the nearest hospital. And for us here at Cedarfield, VCU is a little further, so they're gonna take you to the closest. And you think about Henrico doctors in St. Mary's, they're not that far apart, but they look at VCU as if, it's too far to go if you have a true emergency. Unfortunately, it's nothing we can really do about that, because it's the EMS rule that they have.
And if it is cardiac that you go out with, they, like Tamika says you're going to Forest, and Henrico Doctors Forest is the closest hospital to Cedarfield. Mm-hmm. So even if you have St. Mary's or VCU or something, like Tamika says, it's based on what you're going out for. And the fact that it is 911, there's a good chance it's an emergency. It's not something elective.
Right. They consider it emergency. Sorry to say this, but EMS does not care about preference. They want to get you to the nearest place to get care as soon as possible. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I used EMS a number of times for my husband. When our doctors were at VCU, and they always took me down here.
Oh, wow. Okay, so her response was she's called EMS several times before for her husband and requested VCU, and they've always transported him there.
I can show you.
So, okay, sure. Dr. Johnson has some insight.
I'm currently working urgent care. We have the same thing going on at the urgent care center. It depends on how many EMS people are available, how busy they are, and where they are. They can't afford, if they only have one floating ambulance and the other ones are tied up like at a big accident or something else going on, to send someone that far away. I've been at the Mechanicsville Patient First, and somebody wanted to go to Chippenham. And I've had it that they've said no problem, but I've also had it when they've said, we don't have the staff to put somebody that far away from our home base for where we're providing. So it really depends on the staffing at the EMS. They usually are pretty agreeable to go where you need to go, but it really depends on their staffing and if they can afford to take an EMS vehicle out of the area that they normally cover. So then they will go, in Mechanicsville, they will always go to Regional Memorial, and they will always go to VCU because of the distance. On this end of town, they're willing to go to Henrico Parham, Henrico Forest and to St. Mary's if they are short-staffed because it's a much shorter run. So that really depends on the EMS status at the time. And a lot of those are paid and some of them are pure volunteers. So it's not a blank rule that we will not go to VCU or we will not go to Chippenham. It really depends on the staff that they have available and can they afford to put the people that far out of their area.
Thanks for that clarification. Do we have any other questions?
Where do you get the cards that you were referring to?
Dr. Johnson has a few.
What?
Cards.
We have the cards. We've got them to hand out at the end. We probably don't have enough. We didn't expect this number of people, so.
Can't hear you.
She will, we have some towards the end. You'll be able to pick it up at the back table?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the goal of the card is to be able to attach to your Medicare card, so if you have to go to the hospital, you don't have to worry about remembering a phone number or remembering the process. And once they use that card and call us, we'll take it from there.
I've had a situation in the past where the hospital would not release me unless I had an individual with me versus a taxi cab or other transportation. So, in my case, I ended up just walking out the door, but, you know, and I told them in advance that I wasn't going to have anybody able to pick me up. So, what do you do when you're caught in that circumstance?
I would say that's one that has not come up. So I will look into that to see if we can provide any resources for that. So what you're saying is the ER recommended that someone leave with you and you didn't have anyone to leave with you. So
it wasn't an ER, it was after surgery.
It was what?
After surgery.
After surgery. Okay. So I would suggest that if you're going to have an elect surgery, that you ask your provider, you know, what does the discharge look like for you? Because we do have volunteers that are willing to, you know, do things like that, and we can try to set it up. Because when we do elective surgeries, we try to, whatever the provider says that you need, we try to make sure we provide that. So just ask the question, what will I need post-op or upon discharge, so that we can try to catch that. That's probably something that fell through the crack. But we do have volunteers here that would have been willing to help assist with that, but of course we need to know ahead of time. So I'm sorry that happened. I know we had a question up front. Yes, ma'am?
Does the appendant give any more information there?
Say that one more time.
How much information does that pendant provide?
So when the pendant is pressed, how much information does that give?
It already tells you where they are, right?
Right, that's it. So when you use your pendant, it comes across the radio and it says emergency pool cord apartment 000. Okay, and it comes across that radio and the supervisor have to respond to that. So we don't know what your emergency is until we get there. And sometimes we'll call you first to see if your answer and you can tell us what's going on. And of course, if you're on the floor, you can't answer, so we come over anyway.
If you have a doctor out of the facility, how do you get your vial of life information?
What was the question?
If you have a doctor outside of Cedarfield, how do you get the vial of life information? Do you have any insight on that, Kathy?
Do you have it in your fridge right now, the vial of life?
I had it, my doctor was here when I came. We changed doctors there.
We will repeat it.
We've changed doctors, and as things change on that, how do I get it into, I can write it on the
Oh, that's an easy question. I understand.
If you have a doctor out of the facility, and how do they get the information for the vial of life?
Repeat the question.
So the question was, if I understand it correctly, it's kind of two parts. If you have a change on your vial of life, how do you get that information updated? That was the first question, and that's an easy question. That's call Bonnie Berry at 804-474-8846 and say, I have an update to my vial of life. She will put it in, and then she'll make a copy and actually either hand it to you or bring it to your box so that you can have everything updated. Now, the second part about not having a doctor, I'm not sure if I understand.
Person moves here,
right,
from outside. They have to keep their doctor, which is outside of Cedarfield.
Right.
How does that doctor get the information to you to go in their vial of life?
So, good question. Again, the vial of life is really just basic information if you look at it. It's very important, but it's just basic information. And that information would include your physician so that when, God forbid, you're brought to the hospital, they would know to contact that doctor with that phone number. Because most of our independent living residents, from my experience, pretty much keep their own doctors. Once they've had an incident and they go to say to healthcare, they realize what great doctors we have here, Dr. Shear and Dr. Cook, and Arden, our nurse practitioner. So a lot of times at that point they'll change, but the majority of people in independent living have their own physicians.
Would it be possible for you to make up a blank vial of life so we can give it to our doctor, get that information, and bring it back to you?
I'm all about choice, friends, I'm sure. The question was getting a blank vial of life, to them so they can, or anyone, and fill it out, and then they could get that information to their doctor. Yeah.
Right? You don't get the information the doctor has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The doctor should have all that information.
That's what I'm doing.
Basically, the information that's in the vial of life is your name, your address, your date of birth, your medications, your allergies, and who your physician is. And diagnosis. So like I have hypertension, I have congestive heart failure, I'm a diabetic. That is all in your chart in your physician's office. And usually every time you go in, they're going to say, are you allergic to any new medicines? Has anybody added a medicine, a new medicine to you? So that chart is updated every time at your physician's office. So he has all of that information in his chart or her chart when you're whoever you are seeing as your primary care. And all your diagnosis codes will be listed under your chronic illnesses. So if you want him to print that out and you put that in the vial of life, that is fine, but there's nothing in the vial of life that he doesn't already have in his own chart.
I'm worried about getting it in my vial of life.
Just have him print out what he has and stick it in the vial of life.
Are some of these steps that we've been outlining, are they available on Touchdown, or is there a sheet to pick up somewhere? All of this is great information, but a 1, 2, 3 for several of these scenarios would be really helpful to give to family members.
This is being streamed, right?
Yes.
And they can get it on Touchdown also? Yes.
Well, I don't mean a recording of this. Is there a page on the website that we can copy?
They just said they could create it.
Yeah, we can create that.
Thank you.
What I want to mention is if you land in healthcare, Dr. Cook, Arden, and Dr. Shear, they always call your primary provider and they talk to them and get the background and they collaborate for your care, just so you know that. Yes, sir.
I'm a newbie in Richmond and I haven't the foggiest idea about the hospitals.
Okay.
So, but you've mentioned and used shorthand for some of the names. Is there a way to get a sort through the available hospitals and possibly even insight into the government ratings of those hospitals, for example, infection control? sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't. When you have a choice, you want to pick your options. And so I'm looking for information along that line.
Okay. What's your name?
Chuck Riley. I'm in 178.
I thought you looked familiar. Okay. So I can get you that information. I'll get that information for you so that you can get some understanding of the local hospitals and do some research for you. Okay? I'll get one of my social workers to do it, actually. Yes, sir.
Back to the pendant.
Yes.
I'm walking the pond trail, and I'm at the far end of the pond trail when I stumble and fall and hit my head. Are you going to find me over there?
I will. It may take me some time, but I will. So the way that works is it will give us information on the general whereabouts. That's why I say it may take some time. But our maintenance guys, Jack, he can log into the system and kind of pinpoint in the area where you are. So if that happens and my supervisor called me at like 4 o'clock in the morning, my next thing is going to be, we got to get Jack on the phone. I need Jack to log in and see where it is. So we can pinpoint it on the system that maintenance has to look at. But when it comes across the radio, it's just going to give us a general area of where you are. But we are looking into another system that will be a little bit more accurate for us. So I'm working with Mark Collins because that's one of the concerns we have. And we want to be able to pinpoint exactly where you are. So we're working on that.
My question was on the same subject. I have heard that instead of giving your exact location, the pendant will give your apartment number, which is not helpful.
It should not. So if you are, yeah, the poor court does, but if you are in main dining or it will say emergency, emergency and main dining or something like that. I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it will ring and come across where you are. It may not say the actual particular, like what's the little room outside of concierge desk?
The chapel.
The chapel. It may not say the chapel, but it may say concierge, so we know you're in that area. So we are trying to fix that so we can actually have a better pinpoint area so it doesn't take as long.
And if you live in a cottage and you're out for a walk and you live on the court and you fall on the lane,
it should not. It should give an area, but I will verify that with Jack because I've heard them come across myself. When it comes across, it will give you a particular area because I've been on the hunt before. So I do know that, but what I'll do is get with Jack and Lacey just to make sure that everybody's pendant is set up the same because it could be depending on when you joined Cedarfield or moved into Cedarfield on how it's set up, but I will get with Jack and Lacey to make sure that every pendant that we have is set up for a particular area and not just your cottage or your apartment, just to be on the safe side. Because that's something that I don't want to have to deal with either because it gives us anxiety as well if we're like, we can't find them, we don't know where it is, you know. So it's gonna help on both ends of it.
Okay, 2 solutions to questions that were asked. Whether your physician is here at Cedarfield or not, if you need a new vial of life, you just go to Bonnie, take the old one with you, cross out the stuff that doesn't apply, add in the stuff that does apply, she retypes it up and gives it back to you.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's that solution. Now I forgot what the other one was. I know. Google is your friend. If you want to know the rating of the hospitals in the Richmond area, all you have to do is go into any search engine and just type in ratings of hospital in Richmond, Virginia area, and it'll bring that information up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Could we
I'll
go
get you
back?
right there.
Could we go back to how you get home from the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
I heard you say that the hospital was obligated to bring you home?
If you are admitted to the hospital and you've had a stay there, the hospital case manager will set up your transportation to come home.
Is that a new rule or?
No, ma'am. If you go to the hospital and you're not admitted, you're just seen in the ER and they say, well, everything looks good, you can go home, that's when you don't have transportation. Yep.
If you're admitted, they're obligated.
Yes, ma'am. I have one question here.
Who qualifies for dependents? Wait a minute, so everybody can use.
Who qualifies for dependents?
Everyone can have a pendant. A lot of times they'll say, oh, it's in my walker right next to my bed. I'm like, please, 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 put it on you, on your person. I can't tell you how many people went to reach and, an accident happened. There was a question brought up earlier I just wanted to make a comment on regarding physicians. So if most of independent living has their own doctor, when they come to Cedarfield, Cedarfield's health care is regulated by our health department. And they have a mandate that you have to be seen within 72 hours of admission. The purpose being they want to make sure that you're seen and checked and people know, where you are. So that is why if you have, say, Dr. Smith, but Dr. Smith doesn't practice up in healthcare, but Dr. Cook or Dr. Shear does, you would temporarily be assigned a new physician because those doctors will see you. One of them will see you on, like the same day almost, right?
If it's late at night, that's in within 24 hours.
Within 24 hours you will be seen. But you have a right to choose which one, and you also, once you leave healthcare, can of course go back to your previous doctor. It's just a temporary change. Yeah, Ro.
Are our two doctors at Cedarfield full-time? Wait a minute.
Are our two doctors at Cedarfield, Dr. Shear and Dr. Cook, are they full-time at Cedarfield?
Yes, they are. They take turns as far as certain days Dr. Shear is here and certain days Dr. Cook is here, but they also work well with each other. So if, God forbid, Dr. Shear is sick or not able to come in, Dr. Cook will see her patients and vice versa.
Okay, but when they're not here 24 hours.
Yes, I can talk about that.
Okay.
Kathy's like, get me out of here. So yes, we have 24-hour service. So Monday through Friday, we have a provider here on site at Cedarfield, and after hours, one of those providers are on call. So if we have an emergency after hours, we call them, and they give recommendations based off of the nurse's assessment from there over the phone.
Hi, I'm new here also. I've had some experience with SNFs. There are SNFs and there are SNFs. There are some you wouldn't want to put your relatives in. Mm-hmm. There are some you would not want to be in. My first question, which I have several, the first one is, you mentioned 3. Are those your 3 preferred ones? Does Cedarfield have a relationship with them, or is it just potluck? If one has a space, they'll take whoever's available. That's the first question. Secondly, in terms of going and then coming back, if you don't have to go to nursing care, but you do have to go to rehab, I presume preference goes to Cedarfield people in rehab, or is Cedarfield providing spaces to other people in the community for rehab and other services? My third question is...
Testing my memory, okay.
Okay, my third question is, in the event that rehab doesn't have a space, but you could do rehab back in your apartment, is it possible that Cedarfield would set that up rather than jobbing you out to another facility?
Okay. So he has some experience in the SNF world. So I don't want to, SNF means skilled nursing facility. I know this is recorded, so I'm not going to say things about other facilities, but I will say this. When we have that meeting every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, and we're talking about if we get to a place where we think that we're not going to have a bed, we all get together and say we want them to go at a facility that we trust. We do not officially have any relationships with other facilities, but we are well aware of the quality of other facilities. So we will not recommend that you go to a facility that would not provide the care that we would provide for you. The second question was rehab, and would we admit someone to rehab over a Cedarfield resident? No. We will always have a priority to admit a Cedarfield resident over anyone from the community. And the other question was, can you have therapy in your home or your apartment? The answer is yes. So it really depends on what type of procedure you've had, and that is exactly what we do in that RCC meeting on Wednesdays, is to talk about the other resources that are available instead of you going to another facility. But it just really depends on what type of procedure you've had and how, you know, your medical condition on whether you will be able to go back home with home health. But we will ask the case manager at the hospital to ask the doctor, you know, does the doctor think that our resident will be able to go home with home health? That's the question that we do ask, instead of sending you to another facility. Because of course, when you go to another facility, we can't control what they do, but we do recommend the same quality of Cedarfield. Yes, sir?
If one needed in-home dialysis,
Mm-hmm.
is that possible?
So the question is peritoneal, correct? So the question is if one needed peritoneal dialysis at home in the apartment, is that possible? That is a topic that we're currently discussing on what we will be able to, we're creating a list of things that we know we can take care of, kind of what's in the middle, and kind of what we can't take care of. So we're in the process of creating that now. So I'm not saying no, I'm just saying we're working on creating what we will be able to do. And do it safely, so. Yes, ma'am.
When is the Medicare certification?
The question is the golden question. When is Medicare certification? We're waiting on a visit. The reason why we have not had the visit is because the state is waiting on a document from, yes, so it's just one document that's holding it up. We applied and sent the document in October. So we do not know why it's taken so long for the state to receive that document. So we're just in limbo.
What is the story on how many beds and when will they?
Okay. The question is how many beds we will have for Medicare?
Yes.
20 beds will be certified for Medicare, and that's in the Poppy Place household. When? As soon as they come to do that visit, we'll just
all at the same time?
At the same time. So when they come in to do the visit, what they do is they come in and do the checks and balances to ensure that we have all the things in place per CMS. Once we pass that, the 20 beds are available for Medicare. And I'm hoping that happens real soon.
Has anybody followed up with the state and seen that they've even gotten the form and just haven't acted on it?
We do every week. It's a financial form, by the way, so it's a financial form, and Kevin over at Pinnacle Home Office, he calls every week. And we also send emails to the state supervisor, Paul Wade, and have not received it as of yet.
Okay.
Have not. So as soon as they receive that document, they will put us on the calendar for the visit. And then once they come, we'll be all certified.
Okay, I'm misunderstanding. My question was, did they physically receive the form?
We can't hear them.
Okay.
Sorry.
So her question is, did the state physically receive the form? No. And that's what we're waiting on. So it's a company called Palmetto. So Palmetto is the company where we had to complete the form and turn the form in. The state haven't received it from Palmetto, and that's what we're waiting on. Okay?
And did Palmetto get it?
Yes. One more question. All right. So we have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, for the residents, how will being Medicare certified affect us?
That's a great question. So being Medicare certified, I'm sorry. The question is, how does being Medicare certified help the residents? You will be able to use your Medicare benefit for therapy services and skilled services. You do not have to pay. It's out of pocket. Of course, there's some co-pays that are involved. I'm not going to get down into that, but you will be able to use your Medicare services here in Cedarfield instead of having to go to an outside facility in the community. So it saves you money. Big money. And that was the whole goal behind becoming certified, is to save you money and you do not have to leave home to get skilled services. Okay? It was a pleasure. I see we're passing the mic one more time.
She's got it very pertinent.
Okay, yes ma'am.
If you paid for life care, we have already paid for that. So how is that helping us at all?
You are correct. If you have life care, your services are already covered.
But if you don't have a room for us.
Right. So the big question that we always have is, what if you don't have a room? Or apartment. I cannot guarantee you that every day we will have a room available, but I can guarantee you that the team that we work with try very hard to make sure that we do. And if we're getting to a place where there's one not available, we start looking at other resources and other ways to get you one. The last result is for you to go to another community. Okay?
Isn't it true that with life care?
Isn't it true with life care you wouldn't have to pay, but you get a higher level of nursing care if it's Medicare certified, right?
Yes.
That is correct.
What was her question? It was an answer.
Her question was, if you're life care and you have Medicare, you'll get a higher level of skilled services under life care. So that's another benefit, basically, of getting Medicare certified.
Can I clarify that? It doesn't mean that the life care people are getting better care than the people that are not life care. What it means, once a facility is certified by Medicare, there are stricter standards than what the state standards are for health care. And usually when 20 beds get certified, it causes the whole system to raise every level of care up to that standard, eventually at every bed. So overall, by having Medicare certified beds and by having beds that meet the Medicare requirements, it will increase for everybody up there way over the state level for services and standards that they have to meet. I want to thank everybody for coming and
I just wanted to also say thank you for the turnout. So our dear friend Marion Wainwright, who recently passed away, there's a reception going upstairs right now in Prima, and I think between resident council and this meeting, the family was concerned there wasn't a big turnout, so I did say I wanted to let everyone know that in Prima the family's going to be doing just a celebration of life. If you have the opportunity to stop in, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, we have two things that I put in the back. We have the cards that were spoken about. We're going to run out, so if you, we'll try to get some more for those who can't pick them up. And I put 150 pieces of paper in the back that goes with the last question you have. It's a handout of what you would need to take if you go to health care. Thank you all for the turnout.
Jim, you're shade guard. I found out you're in charge of it.
Oh, don't turn it.
It's beautiful.
I take quiet. I try to do it quiet.
You should take pride in that. There's a lot of weeds out
Don't you
there.
love it? I know it. Oh God, right. I have a routine. I go to work.
That's a bigger one. Who are you? Send that dog on.
You did yeah, good. It goes fine. Seems like too much.
Well, they also to make it right.